Welcome to the Action Network podcast. I'm Gilles Gallant. I'm joined by NFL betting expert and futures analyst with the Action Network, Brandon Anderson. It is rankings week here at Action Network. We've already done quarterbacks, skill position groups, offensive lines, but today it's time to discuss the coaching staffs. Now, Brandon, this isn't just the head coach. I'm sure the average casual fan, they could name 1 through 32 of the NFL head coaches, but this is a little more nuanced of a ranking here because we're looking at full staffs. So can you just elaborate a little bit more what went into these rankings and what kind of factors we need to focus on?
Yeah, this is really exciting for me today. First time we've been able to do coaching staffs on the podcast. This is something I've been doing the research on for years now, and that really isn't out there too much from what I've seen. Not just head coaches, not even just offense and defensive coordinators, but about the special teams coaches, how about the offensive line coaches, some of those position guys, with some of the assistants, the old guys in the room, kind of looking at everything as best as we can. And of course, it's impossible to figure out outside of the context of everything. That's what the research is for, digging in and figuring out the best you can. Coaching matters a lot. And to me, we said this on the Offensive Lines podcast, don't turn it off. These two, offensive lines and coaching, for me, the better, are the biggest edge I have on the market, especially coaching. Coaching can be a force multiplier. So I think a lot of other positions are additive. You're better or you're worse, you plus or you minus. Coaching, you can multiply. Coaching can make 11 guys better, can elevate the whole scheme, the whole better than the sum of its parts. That's why coaching matters. So what am I looking for? Head coach, stuff we see, the in-game decisions, the clock management, the timeouts. We kind of think of that as the head coach's job. That's their job, but there's a lot more than that. We think about the press conferences, how do they sound on the microphone? What we don't see is these are the people in charge of hiring the staff. All the rest of these guys, they've got to hire them and develop them and keep them around and replace them when they develop them too well, which happens a lot. They got to control the locker room. We don't get to see that part, but we can kind of see culture setting a little bit. What's the identity? Does a team know what it is now? Obviously, we've seen that with Dan Campbell and the Lions in a huge way there. At coordinators, all right, offense and defense, we can measure that much better than we can measure as a head coach. We actually have results for your offense, for your defense. We can see the scheme year to year. So pay attention to the scheme, pay attention to who can maximize talent. Not necessarily because we had the best players, but because we made the best of our players. And I think a key thing here, too, that gets overlooked. There are floor raisers, and then there are ceiling busters. And I think throughout the coaching staffs, some of the ones where people are going to be like, hey, wait a minute, why is my team so low? A lot of it might be because, okay, you raised the floor to a 500 team, but I'd like to win a Super Bowl. Again, the goal is, who do I pick to coach my team to win a Super Bowl? Same as all the other tasks that we've been doing. So we're looking at coaching staffs, the whole entire thing, head coach, offense and defensive coordinator, and where it applies, special teams positions, all that. As always, everything is in tiers. We'll just talk about the team and talk about some of the names along the way. This will all be in a written version like the rest of these as well. And on this one, very important because on the article, when you read it, you can see below each team, the head coach individual rank 1 to 32 and the offense and defense coordinator 1 to 32. I ranked it all. So we can't be all, that's 96 numbers in the podcast. So it won't all be here today, but check the written version. It's a good companion piece, especially for this one.
Yes, absolutely. And they're all available, as you said, on actionnetwork.com. So let's get into some coaching staff rankings. We're going to go 1 through 32. We'll start at tier 1. You have called this the gold standard. And for reference, for anyone who read your coaching staff rankings last year, these are the same top 3 teams that you had in last year, but just in different order. This year, number 1, the San Francisco 49ers. At number 2, the Baltimore Ravens. And number 3, the Kansas City Chiefs. Talk to me about why the order swap. I think it was pretty obvious that these 3 teams are probably going to be near the top. But I guess what I was wondering is what changed between the 49ers and the Chiefs where you ended up swapping them?
Yeah, really the one change here that swapped San Francisco up, if you can believe it, it's Robert Saleh. We're back with good things. We love a fired head coach where it didn't work out for them, demoted back down to the thing we know they're good at, running the offense, or usually running the defense. So Robert Saleh, even though all the game management, all the outside facing head coaching stuff with New York, terrible. We dumped on him for years. We know it was bad. But even then, even in New York, the defense was really good. Look, we even saw it last year. The defense was pretty good under Saleh. Even while he was there, they fired him and they dropped off a cliff last year, even with the exact same guys in the exact same year still. So his defense has performed year after year. He often does take a year to kind of get the pieces into place. So that's a bit of a concern here. But of course, he was in San Francisco already. They know the personnel. Some of these dudes are even just the same guys that performed. San Francisco, when they've done their very best, has been a high floor offense, but an elite defense when they actually come home and really get to those NFC Championship games. 4 already for San Francisco. I have called Kyle Shanahan maybe the Patrick Mahomes of the NFC, just in the way that they get there year after year after year. So to me, that's the big assistant name hire this year, Robert Saleh, and that puts the Niners just above the other two. Ravens, Chiefs, you pretty much know what you're getting. Like, we know who these staffs are. With the Ravens, Todd Monken, offensive coordinator, has really proven himself. They're just lapping the field at this point. They could take another leap. Zach Orr on defense, I'm still kind of moderate on in the rankings, but they really came together late in the season. With the Chiefs, I'm slightly downgrading. I don't love the Matt Nagy of it all. I don't know if it's Matt Nagy. I don't know if it's Andy Reid. I don't really believe Patrick Mahomes just suddenly got like from 1st to 10th in quarterbacks in the last 2 years. But the numbers say the offense and the passing did. I think it's Matt Nagy or maybe something about Andy Reid falling off. So I'm dinging them just a little bit there. But the standard is the standard here at the top.
Okay, so yeah, the 49ers, Chiefs, Ravens, you have those in the top 3. Sorry, it's Niners first, Ravens second, Chiefs third. Before we move to tier 2, do you have anything else you want to mention about these 3 teams, or we could just jump into tier 2?
Yeah, I don't think so. We know these teams. We'll have a lot more to say about some of the others.
Yeah, and there's a lot of continuity on those staffs too, so that does make sense. Let's move to tier 2 then, and you have labeled this tier as just look at the annual results. And it's pretty simple on that front, because when you look at number 4, you have the Los Angeles Rams, number 5, the Buffalo Bills, number 6, the Minnesota Vikings, number 7, the Green Bay Packers, all playoff teams from last year. I want to start with the Vikings because you are the resident Vikings fan here. And just to give people a little peek behind the curtain, like we talked about their rankings, this morning, just looking at this, and you were pretty down on the Vikings, at least the way you were describing them to me. And now I see them still ended up at 6. So what changed in the last few hours?
Yeah, I would say not necessarily down on the Vikings, maybe more down relative on the Vikings. ESPN did their coaching staff rankings and had the Vikings number 1. And I was like, come on, number 1 for the Vikings? What are we doing? And so I thought they'd be closer to 10. Technically speaking, they are closer to 10 in the rankings here. I think it's a very good staff. Kevin O'Connell is now being talked about as this like elite play caller, a top 3 play caller sort of guy. I just can't quite get there on that level. I think he's been fantastic. I'm happy with my guy as a Vikings fan. If you look at the results, though, he's not really found a run game just yet. I hope that changes this year. The offensive line's really good. They've got a couple good running backs. That should change, but the results haven't come yet. And now the counter argument is, okay, but Sam Darnold, who are you playing this with? And that's a fair argument. So what happens if there's a top level player in there? Well, counter argument, it's JJ McCarthy this year starting in, and you're basically looking for a high floor sort of guy. So I'm convinced of Kevin O'Connell's floor raising. He's been amazing at that. I'm not positive yet about the ceiling, and some of the DVOA and advanced metrics, they're not quite there yet. Brian Flores' defense, awesome. Like, nothing to say about that. That's been great. I don't love the special teams. Matt Daniels, the coach there, they've been bottom 6 DVOA each of the 3 years he's been in. So that's a slight drop for them, but it's just slightly questioning the ceiling of the offense. And can we actually get the numbers rather than just the reputation?
Right. And I think, though, they did deserve a bit of an upgrade. If you're able to rehabilitate Sam Darnold's career like that and make him get that kind of payday from Seattle, right? I just think that was something that they needed to be rewarded for that front. So I guess the question, just to follow up about the Vikings, like, would you rather swap out the Viking staff for Matt LaFleur and the Packers? Like, I'm just kind of wondering here, NFC North, would you rather have the Packers coaching staff coaching that Vikings roster instead?
You're going to make me turn in my Vikings fandom card here if I'm not careful. I am really high on Matt LaFleur, and for some reason, that seems to be kind of a controversial take online. There are a lot of Matt LaFleur haters out there. I don't really get it. I think he's been fantastic. Last season, he saved the season. Jordan Love goes out hurt. And Matt LaFleur is winning games with Malik Willis, who I don't even know if is an
Yep.
NFL player. So he's winning games. I thought Matt LaFleur's in-game decisions are really good, just at maximizing their chances to win, just getting those extra couple percents each time, making the right choices. Last year, we added Jeff Hafley at defensive coordinator, and I was really excited about him coming out of the season. You dig into it a little bit more, there's some reasons to maybe be a little cautious. The Green Bay had a ton of turnovers for us last year. That's not necessarily going to carry over year to year for most teams. And I like Anthony Campanelli. He was the run guy. He's gone now. So there's a little bit of concern of like, okay, it's the brain drain that happens, right? When the staff is good, then some of the staff leaves to go elsewhere. But I think Hafley did a great job. Green Bay defense had been underperforming for years and years with a lot of talent. They jumped to 7th in DVOA last year. So I like the defensive leap. I think LaFleur is a very high floor and some ceiling in there as well. So you interpret as you will what you think about those answers. I can't say it on the record, but I do think Packers fans should be very, very happy with their coaching staff.
I was just going to say, I think the cheese hat is in the mail. I think it's coming to your house right now, because that sounds like a turncoat if I've ever heard it from a Vikings fan. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. We're done on the Vikings Packers. I want to talk about the Rams Bills quickly, because they always seem to kind of end up around this area. An elite head coach in Sean McVay, Sean McDermott, maybe not necessarily elite, but still somebody who I think is very serviceable. What are they doing to kind of maintain this type of ranking for you?
Yeah, I mean, Sean McVay is just staying Sean McVay. There's not much more than that. Like, there's really not even a lot else in the ranking. Just by virtue of having Sean McVay, the Rams are going to stay in the top 5, both as a coach and, of course, as an elite offensive play caller. In-game stuff, there's a little bit to question there. Is timeouts, is 4th down, some of that management. They could go even higher if Chris Shula, the defensive coordinator, takes a further step forward. We need to see the defense perform, but I think that's a way for them to possibly get up into the top tier. I wouldn't really have expected McDermott and the Bills to come in the top 5 here. Like, McDermott seems like, we had offensive line rankings. There's that like 6 to 10 good, not great group. That feels like what I expect Sean McDermott and his staff to look like. I think it's just kind of maybe one of those where somebody had to be in at number 5 and it became them. But year after year, they keep winning. And at some point, that matters. We count that. He's had coordinators go out the door. Now, I kind of think that's because he's blaming them at times and letting someone else take the fall. But we've seen Buffalo, I think, have a lot of bad luck. We've seen a lot of bad injuries in Buffalo, and the defense continues to perform. Now, the one thing I'm concerned about is McDermott's defense is what's kind of failed the team in the playoffs. We talked about with Josh Allen, right? Allen's been awesome in the playoffs as an individual. You got to win the games, but I think McDermott, it's a lot of cover too. I wonder if maybe at the highest level, against those elite playoff quarterbacks, you're going to have to face somebody there. Are you getting exposed? Is that not the defense? Is a defense that's high floor in the season, but maybe can't get you over the top? It's my one concern with McDermott. I love Aaron Kromer, offensive line coach, one of the best in the league. They went out and got Chris Tabor at special teams also. Buffalo has been great special teams for a while and then lost their guy. Going out and getting him, they were at bottom 5 special teams last year. I know this seems crazy. Why do I keep bringing up special teams? It's about a 1/8 of your rating as an NFL team. It's not nothing, and I think that Buffalo can have a big boost there as well.
All right, so that was tier 2. Let's move now to tier 3. We start at number 8, the Los Angeles Chargers. Number 9, the Seattle Seahawks. Number 10, the Houston Texans. Number 11, the Chicago Bears. Number 12, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And number 13, the Denver Broncos. You have titled this tier Out with the Old, In with the New. I will just say a lot to digest here. So I'm just going to start with the elephant in the room here. The Bears, like a fringe top 10 coaching staff. Is that how much we value Ben Johnson coming over in that staff?
Yes, it is. That's exactly what it is. You've heard, if you've been listening this week, hopefully you have, a lot of Ben Johnson talk. A lot of Ben Johnson. I think on every episode, Ben Johnson in for the Bears, Ben Johnson out for the Lions. What's it all mean? If Ben Johnson sucks, I'm going to have to reanalyze the entire NFC North somehow. But Ben Johnson, to me, he ended the year as my number 1 offensive play caller last season. So you bring that in to replace what they have, like 3 or 4 different play callers for the Bears last year. The Bears were my number 32 coaching staff to end the season. So they fired somebody, they bring somebody in, they fire them. Like, there's constant changing there. So Ben Johnson, we don't know yet if he's going to be a great head coach. The stuff that head coaches do, we don't know. Can you do that while calling plays? The play calling is going to be great. We talked a lot about that. Declan Doyle will help in offensive play calling and play design more so. What I like here too is another one, Dennis Allen, fired head coach, pretty good coordinating coach. Now, I think Allen is maybe not quite the level of someone like a Robert Saleh, but I think that he should come in and help out what's a pretty talented Bears defense. And quite frankly, a key thing that helps with, hey, Ben Johnson, just do offense. I got this. I got this over here. I'll handle the defense. You do your thing, manage the timeouts and the in-game stuff. That's huge. That's really valuable to have that. And I love the rest of the staff too. Just some names on the staff. Remember Eric Bieniemy? The guy that was always on the Chiefs with all the great rosters. He's coaching this team. Running backs, Press Taylor, Antoine Randall, JT Barrett. He was the Detroit Lions quarterbacks coach in recent years. He came with. There's a lot of powerful names here. I think this is a staff that's completely overhauled. And look, as a Vikings fan, this is our third staff in the division already. I don't love that we've been waiting for years for Ben Johnson to get a team finally. I don't love that it happened right there in the division. And for me, right here in town, as I'm going to have to hear people talking about Ben Johnson about as much as I've been talking about him all this week too. So I think it really is that. I think they really are a fringe top 10 coaching staff already, and I will be betting accordingly.
All right, so Bears at 11. Let's talk about the two teams ahead of them, where the Seahawks and Texans. And looking at those coaching staffs, I don't want to say similarity, but it feels like they kind of mirror each other for the way that they represent. Like, why are you so excited about these two coaching staffs?
Yeah, it really is a lot that's similar. It's culture and it's defense. You got D'Amico Ryans for the Texans, Mike McDonald for Seattle. These are my island teams, right? The last couple of years, these are the teams that I was really in on. And Seattle broke my heart losing like the 4th or 18th tiebreaker to miss the playoffs last year. But both of these teams have done what we expected when they hired the new staff. You get this defensive-minded coach. Now, I prefer an offensive-minded head coach, but these guys are not just changing the defense. They're changing the culture. It's the Dan Campbell sort of thing that's happened with Detroit. We've seen it with lots of other teams. You're setting an identity. Who are you? Mike McDonald, organized chaos, right? We're going to be violent. We're going to be aggressive. D'Amico Ryans, we're going to play at 200% at all times. We're going to show up, and you see it like you turn on a game. You could take the uniforms away. You'd be like, oh, that's a D'Amico Ryans defense right now. Like, I know what I'm watching out there. So to me, that is such a high floor to have a defense, to be able to maximize the defense. These are two top 5 defenses because of these coaches, not just the players on the team. So the other thing they have in common is we don't really know what the offense is going to look like yet. Clint Kubiak for Seattle comes over from the Saints. He was the hot name in September last year, and then the Saints all got hurt and they fell apart. And Clint Kubiak, as a Vikings fan, not a hot name for me. I've had Vikings experience with Clint Kubiak. He's had ups and downs in his career. So what will that mean for Seattle, especially with their offensive line problems? With Houston, they get rid of Bobby Slowick. I thought that was a pretty important call by D'Amico Ryans. They could have just run it back and tried again. So now you have Nick Caley. We don't know a lot about Nick Caley. Came over from the Rams, long time with Belichick and the Patriots. It's a lot of pretty good names to have in your background. That's a pretty good coaching tree to bring in. So we got to be cautious with some of these young corners that we don't know a ton about yet. But I think there's a lot to believe in and a lot of good culture. And those are just franchises that should feel very good about their staff going forward.
At number 8 with the Los Angeles Chargers, because Jim Harbaugh and his coaching staff, when they come into the NFL, they tend to kind of float all boats. And I guess what I'm wondering is, I was surprised that you had them in tier 3. How much of a divide is it between the Packers at 7 and the Chargers at 8, where you would end up downgrading them to another tier?
Yeah, it's pretty close. You know, obviously there's the next team down. Harbaugh is now 55, 25-1 for his NFL career. It's an 11.5 win pace. Hard to argue with that. 5 seasons coaching, 11 wins or more in all but one of them. So a lot of good stuff. I think what I don't like about Harbaugh is he's very run heavy and very conservative. And so he kind of chooses his staff accordingly. So it's really not even what I don't like about Harbaugh. It's more, I don't love Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator.
Right.
We know what we've seen from Greg Roman. We've seen him with a really mobile quarterback have this amazing running offense, but it's so run heavy. And last year we saw that, and then we saw it slowly fade toward the pass later in the year. So I'm open. Maybe that was finally a change. Maybe they're going to start to do a little bit more pass heavy that way. we like what we saw from Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator. That was actually a more inspired hire. He came from Michigan with Harbaugh, but Minter had a lot of success last year with not a ton of talent on the roster. Now they kind of got found out late in the season, but Minter, if he does it again, he could be one of those, he's on a different team coaching next year as the head coach, guys. So I like Minter a lot. I like Harbaugh pretty well. Greg Roman's holding me back, and that's a little bit on Harbaugh too, because that's just been his dude over the years. So very good team, but I worry with the run-heavy Roman of it all. Is there a top ceiling there?
You mentioned like coordinators holding maybe a staff back. I'm looking at the Steelers and Broncos, and I would have thought, given how the quality of head coach, that you would have likely have had them in the top 10. So I just have to ask, like, what do you have against Mike Tomlin and Sean Payton? Because, I mean, Mike Tomlin, you're going to downgrade him here, and he's just going to backdoor into the playoffs again.
Yeah, he's going to backdoor to a playoff loss by 20 again also. And that's the problem is I talked at the top about floor versus ceiling. To me, these are the ultimate floor raisers, but I don't know if I believe in the ceiling on either of them. Mike Tomlin's teams, what have they lost now? I think 6 straight playoff games. So it's not really valuable to get to the playoffs and then get embarrassed on my way out. There's some value in it. And a lot of franchises, like the Browns right there in the division, great. Love to lose in the playoffs every year. That sounds, how do we sign up for that? So, of course, the grass is always greener. But with Mike Tomlin, it's a little bit what we talked about with Harbaugh just now. Arthur Smith, great floor raiser, really run heavy. Not the guy I want if I'm going to go win a Super Bowl. And frankly, not the guy I want if I'm going to go get Aaron Rodgers. I think that's a real clash this season. So I know the culture with Tomlin. I know the stat about never being below 500, yada, yada. There are other coaches in that range, like Peyton and a few others we'll talk about. But the floor is there. I don't know about the ceiling. With Sean Payton, 7 or more wins now all 17 years. So that's his version of the Tomlin stat. But 11 wins or less, 12 of the 17. And by the way, all but one of his Saints years were with Drew Brees. So if you Drew Brees all those years, you made the playoffs 10 out of 17 times. I don't know, man. I'm not that excited. Like, to me, I wonder if there's a little bit like Bengals Joe Burrow looking in there. Like, why aren't the Bengals better? Maybe it's the coaching that's not necessarily holding back, but maybe not elevating quite as much. The counter argument with the Broncos is, well, what about the defense last year? Vance Joseph, the defense was amazing. Yeah, it was. Vance Joseph's defense are really, really aggressive. They blitz a ton, like as much as anybody. And when it's good, it's great. But when it's bad, it's really bad for Vance Joseph. His defense results over the years have been really volatile all over the place. So I worry about Denver. We've had a lot of Denver worry this week. If Vance Joseph's defense is awesome again, maybe that is the ceiling on the team. But if it's not, there's high volatility there. If the defense falls out and that kind of moderate floor offense and Sean Payton can't quite get to the next level, that's where I'm worried with the Broncos.
Football season is here, folks, and we've got some huge improvements and updates coming on the award-winning Action Network app, which we're very excited to discuss in the weeks ahead. But to get the most out of the app, you still need to be an Action Pro subscriber, and it's only with Action Pro where you get real-time pick alerts from myself, Brandon, the entire Action Network team of experts. Plus, you can access pro projections powered by Sean Kerner and our predictive analytics team. Right now, Action Network podcast listeners can save $20 off the annual price of Action Pro. Just go to actionnetwork.com/pro and use code POD20. That's actionnetwork.com/pro and use code POD20 for $20 off the annual price of Action Pro. All right, we are back with the coaching staff rankings in the NFL for 2025, and we move to tier 4, which Brandon has called could be a roller coaster. And at number 14, you have the Las Vegas Raiders. Number 15, the Philadelphia Eagles. Number 16, the Washington Commanders. And number 17, the Miami Dolphins. And I got to say, Brandon, I feel like you're kind of trying to piss people off with this, especially the Eagles position here. But again, I'm a Cowboys fan. I'm not too high on the Eagles coaching staff, but I do feel like 15 feels like a direct slight. So I would just say, what happened here?
Yeah, look, what do we do with Nick Sirianni at this point? I had an impossible time trying to figure out where do I slot Nick Sirianni in my head coaching rankings. Listen to a lot of other podcasts. What do they think about Nick Sirianni? And they kind of have the same thing. It's like, oh, we probably should put him in the top 10, right? Because he just won a Super Bowl, but it kind of feels begrudging. Eagles fans, look, you know you wanted this guy gone a year ago. Yeah. You wanted him gone part of last season at times. the good is really good. Like the fourth down decisions, the aggression, all that stuff is really good in game. There's just weird vibes off the field. Like, again, I don't know what's happening in the locker room, but it just feels unsettled. Like you're going off as you walk off the field and like jeering at the fans. Like, come on, like let's be an NFL professional coach. I think he does a lot for them. He's given them some of an identity. I wonder, to me, I got another NBA comp for you here. Is he like the Russell Westbrook of coaches? You got a lot, but you take a lot off the table. Yeah, you thought they're pissed off before. How about now? So that's part of the thing. The other is that for the fourth straight season, we're going to have a new offensive coordinator. And I couldn't really find out a ton about Kevin Patullo, except that he's been in Philly for a while. So I think this is kind of a Sirianni bet on himself. I don't love that as an offensive coordinator sort of proposition. So I have Patullo ranked pretty low because we just don't know yet what can they be. And Philly is very, very run heavy. It obviously works for them, but the offensive passing efficiency is there, but on such low volume, it's just not a great formula for wins in the modern NFL. So I have to be skeptical there. I have to sell a little bit on Sirianni. Obviously, Vic Fangio is awesome. Jeff Stoutland, the offensive line coach. There's a lot to like there, so I can't be out. But I know you don't get to just take away the Super Bowl, but if you took away the Super Bowl, I think we'd still be pretty skeptical about this staff.
Yeah, I think if you took away a Super Bowl title from a lot of coaching staffs, we'd probably have those. All right, I just want to talk about the Commanders now because, all right, I want to stick with the division because pretty successful turnaround last season from Dan Quinn and crew. Middle of the pack. I don't think anybody was thinking of them as a top 10 coaching staff. So are we buying or selling the Commanders coaching staff at this stage?
Yes, I think we're doing both. We're buying and selling. To me, this is a real bump up for Washington from my rankings last year. So this is me accepting, okay, I was off on this team a year ago. I was not in on Dan Quinn. We all know how I feel about Cliff Kingsbury. I've never been in on a Kingsbury experience. Cliff was pretty good last year. Cliff actually brought in a lot of creativity in the run game, and I thought that helped the team quite a bit. We'll see how that holds up. I'm going to hold a little skepticism here as well still. We saw the run game fall off a little bit toward the end of the season as the O-line got hurt, but it kind of all plays in. Some of the stuff they're running is pretty simple concepts, and I think that's good because it helped the offensive line and helped a rookie quarterback, but also means that the defense can catch on a little bit. So you can only be so complex that way. Dan Quinn, love the aggression until the aggression doesn't work anymore. So let's see, how does that hold up for them? How does that look this year going forward? I like him as a defensive guy. So I think that actually has kind of come to fruition there. I thought what they did last year was a departure in a good way. Like, Dan Quinn quite well. We've seen a lot of him. Normally, he needs his pass rush and he needs his cover guys. He didn't have those, either one really in Washington. So he kind of did some different stuff, using Frankie Luhu as a weapon and, trying some other things. So I like some of the things I saw much more than I expected. I think middle of the pack is a compliment for Washington, but they're going to have to, this is probably one that goes up 5 to 7 spots or down that many by next year. This is me kind of like Nick Sirianni. I'm kind of shrugging. I don't really know what to do here.
Well, speaking of compliments, I think one of the biggest compliments you've given to this ranking is the Las Vegas Raiders, because coming into last year with Antonio Pierce and that crew, you had them ranked dead last, and now you have them 14th, middle of the pack, and you've got a 73-year-old grandpa running that coaching staff. I just need to know, how much do you believe in Pete Carroll and this coaching staff?
And I love Pete Carroll. So we love our 73-year-old grandpas. I think Pete Carroll, you got to be careful with the age, of course, but Carroll has always been so good with young guys. His kind of culture that he's brought to USC, that sort of just running up and down the sidelines, to me, I can put the age out the window a little bit when I've seen how well he develops guys. And I think, too, as we sort of get some distance from Pete Carroll and the Seahawks and Russell Wilson, I think for a lot of that time, we sort of talked about, man, Russell Wilson sure does make Pete Carroll look good. Well, guess what? We've got more Russell Wilson data now. Turns out, maybe Pete Carroll made Russell Wilson look pretty good. Maybe that's what's happening all those years. He's been great with defensive backs. He's great with special teams. He's had, since his one Jets debut year, 17 seasons, at least 7 wins in all of them. So it's kind of right there with like the Sean Paytons of the world, the Mike Tomlins of the world. I think we should kind of think of him the same way. And then, of course, we're excited. Chip Kelly is back in the NFL. And for once, only as a play caller. and not the guy you remember from the Eagles, where it's just like no huddles and going crazy all the time. A little less tempo now, more creative run game, sort of like what we saw with Cliff Kingsbury, bring in something different from college there. Can't believe I just used Cliff Kingsbury as a compliment for Chip Kelly. I don't know how you should take that, but I think there's a lot to like here. Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator, we like him as well. Just a huge floor raising opportunity and maybe some ceiling too with Chip Kelly. The Raiders, you got a real coaching staff now.
Okay, before we move on, I just want to ask you, because typically this podcast might hear a little bit of Cliff Kingsbury slander. I just wanted to know a little bit more about the Commanders and where, like, do you have Cliff Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator? Like, where do you have him ranked, and how much would he impact that? Because I know that from a head coaching standpoint, we were always looking to fade him.
Yeah, let's see. Where do I have Cliff Kingsbury? So we didn't say anything much about Miami in this section. I'm feeling Miami as I'm looking this up. Love Mike McDaniel as offensive coordinator. Guess what? I think I want my team to have him as my offensive coordinator next year when I think he may not be in Miami anymore. So maybe that's where that one goes. Kingsbury as offensive coordinator. I have raised him in my rankings to 15th, right about middle of the pack, right about where Washington sits as well. So yeah, I'm believing a little bit. You got to believe what the results are showing you. And I think it's worked with Jaden Daniels. That's a pretty big boost on where I've been from him before. And again, we love our failed head coach back to coordinators. Just do one thing and do it really well. Normally defense, but maybe some of these offensive guys, Cliff, Chip Kelly, maybe this is where things are going with them.
All right, let's move to the next tier now. And you have called this serious turnaround potential. Maybe even you could call them like wild cards, I guess, with the chance to move up. At number 18, you have the Indianapolis Colts. Number 19, Arizona Cardinals. Number 20, Jacksonville Jaguars. 21, Carolina Panthers. And 22, the Atlanta Falcons. And I think the reason why I wanted to almost kind of call it a wild card is I feel like there's a lot of unknowns, especially first-year head coach like in Jacksonville, for example. So let's start with one team in this group, the Jaguars. Like, are you in on Liam Cohen? Where do we stand on that?
I really like Liam Cohen. So I'm pretty in on this staff, which I'm a little cautious. It's a very young, a very green staff. A lot of times you get somebody like Liam Cohen, who only really had 1 year calling plays for the Buccaneers last year. He's bounced around, but you think that you usually bring in like the Dennis Allen, like Ben Johnson did. You bring in some veterans. They didn't really do that on this roster. Grant Udinsky, the offensive coordinator, Liam will call the plays, I'm sure, but he's a pretty young, up-and-coming name I know pretty well from Minnesota. Anthony Campanelli, we mentioned him with Green Bay. He's the run guy that really helped turn around Green Bay's run defense. Well, that's really good, but there's not a lot of veteran presence on this team as far as the coaching staff. And as much as I love Liam Cohen, I thought he helped Baker Mayfield play elite football last year. I thought he built overnight a great run game out of nothing. Tampa had been terrible at run game for years. Guess who's like that? The Jacksonville Jaguars. So that'd be music to Jaguars fans' ears if that could happen. But much as I love your play calling, you got a game call now too. And it's a lot to ask for you to go to a new franchise, do all that at the same time. I tend to be Mr. Optimist on some of these like new offensive guys. And I go all in on these young coaching staffs. And look, I know I got Ben Johnson and the guys up at number 11, but I'm learning mostly, other than the Bears, to temper expectations a little bit. So I have my Liam Cohen head coach ranking pretty low. We don't know a lot yet, and you got multiple jobs to do, but I have his offensive coordinator ranking really high, and I do think there's a lot of potential here, but a pretty low floor too if things don't go well.
No, you had said that the Jaguars, they had pretty young coaching staff, whereas the Colts and Cardinals, a lot of retaining of coordinators over the years, two head coaches that used to be Eagles coordinators, and both kind of floating around playoff contention, not quite there yet in their tenure, but just on the cusp. What's it going to take to push those staffs maybe to the top half of the rankings?
Yeah, I mean, I think results. Unfortunately, they're going to have to actually win the games and make the playoffs. And frankly, I like both these staffs quite a bit. But at some point, after a few years of not quite getting the job done, for a lot of good reason, there's missing some talent, there's a lot of injuries on the rosters. At some point, you got to actually win the games. You got to do the thing. And like, to me, these are top 15, maybe top 10 coaching staffs in waiting, but you got to go win. And by the way, when you actually do the thing, then they're going to lose some of their coordinators, the other hot young names like Drew Petzing, offensive coordinator for the Cardinals. Nick Rallis, defensive coordinator. I had him last heading into last season. I have him more like middle of the pack now. There's a lot of fun things that they're doing, but you got to do more than fun things. You got to go win some football games. And I know 7 and 8 wins, it's not nothing considering how things have looked, but give me to 10. Give me a playoff berth, contend in a playoff game, and maybe get one more year with the coaching staff before the guys exodus to bigger jobs elsewhere. I like both these staffs a lot. I think Steichen has been really underrated. So lots to like here. Just look, somebody like, it's hard to rank coaches because there's a lot of stuff to like in a lot of places. Sorry, not to Dallas fans, which we haven't gotten to, but most teams you can find something you like, but somebody's got to rank like 19th and 25th and 30th. So that's where these guys go, just kind of barely into the top 20.
Just over 30 minutes, and Brandon immediately stabs me in the side. All right, NFC South, Panthers and Falcons. First teams from these groups. Is there either, like, I know you have the Panthers at 21 and Falcons at 22, but do you actually prefer the Panthers coaching staff over the Falcons?
Yeah, it's tough. I think to me, the question is, do I prefer Dave Canales as the play caller, also the head coach, obviously the Panthers, or do I prefer Zach Robinson with the Falcons? And I was really excited about Zach Robinson last year going into the season, and then it sort of felt like the Falcons were disappointing to me, at least during the season. Looking back, I noticed as I kind of pull up the stats, I looked at Zach Robinson's chart, and his offensive numbers, like, you see the run pass ratio, the yards per carry, yards per attempt, just some of the basic stuff. I was like, oh, nothing really changed from last year to the year before that. Same thing. So he didn't really make a difference. Wait a minute. The year before was the Rams and Sean McVay's offense, and that's the stats I was looking at. And the year after is him with the Falcons, and no quarterback, by the way, because Kirk Cousins can't move, and then a rookie at the end of the season with Michael Penix.
Right.
That's pretty good, it turns out. I felt a lot better after I see those sort of results where, okay, maybe there are good things happening here, and there's a lot to like about him. He has a really strong pedigree. I think Zach Robinson, there's a chance he could be that next star play caller. If you like the Falcons, I think Zach Robinson, even more than Michael Penix, maybe needs to be the reason why. So to me, I think the Panthers proved themselves a little more last year with what they've done with Bryce Young. But I don't know yet if I'm in on the Falcons, but I'm excited about Zach Robinson, and with the kind of the floor of Raheem Morris and Jeff Ulbrich as sort of a defensive identity, what can Zach Robinson do with a lot of talent there in Atlanta? Maybe finally that team kind of puts everything together.
The Ultimate 2025 Fantasy Football Draft Kit is here. Sean Kerner and Chris Raybon have rankings, tiers, cheat sheets, and more to help you navigate your fantasy football drafts. And new subscribers to Fantasy Labs NFL can use code FLEX20 for $20 off at fantasylabs.com/flex. That's $20 off with code FLEX20 at fantasylabs.com/flex. All right, let's now move to tier 6 for the coaching staff rankings in the NFL. And you have labeled this tier as the old guard. And at number 23, you have the Cleveland Browns. At number 24, the Detroit Lions. And number 25, the New England Patriots. And we got to start with the Lions because, whoa, like that, for a team that is very highly favored, is at least top 5 team to potentially win the Super Bowl, that cannot be good, them ranking 24th for their coaching staff coming into the 2025 season.
Yeah, I think that one's going to really surprise some people. How can I look? I brought up Dan Campbell multiple times already in this podcast as an example of a guy that turned around a team and set a culture. Dan Campbell has a serious brain drain on his hands. Again, one more time, Ben Johnson is gone, as is Aaron Glenn. Both coordinators have left, took a lot of the other kind of positional coaches with them as well. So I have a brand new staff in Detroit, and frankly, I don't have guys that I can find out a lot about. John Morton, the offensive coordinator, he's only had 1 year in the NFL of offensive coordinator. He's got a long history of football experience, but his year he had didn't go that well. There's a reason you only have 1 year, right? So this is, by the way, not Johnny Morton, the old Lions receiver. That's what I thought. He's a different guy, but there's not a ton to know about him. And Kelvin Shepard on defense. Now, he's kind of the local here. He was Detroit linebacker coach the last few years. He's a pretty young guy. He's never called plays before. So we don't necessarily have a lot of experience we're adding in here. Now, look, you're going to say, okay, well, Dan Campbell, he's found other guys. He's the one that developed and got the guys where they were. That's great. I will adjust when Morton and Shepard are awesome. I will move the Lions right back up the rankings. But for right now, I have these two as bottom 3 coordinators because we just don't know yet. That's not necessarily saying you're bad. It's saying we don't know if you're good, and I don't have a lot of reasons to believe that you probably will be good yet. So Dan Campbell, really good. Is Dan Campbell a top 3 coach, or is he like a top 10 coach? And for right now, I have to reserve a little bit of steam on him as well. Again, I'm happy to put him up there once you prove, okay, I've lost some guys, but now I'm doing pretty well with the new guys. Otherwise, I worry a little bit. Another NBA analogy is Dan Campbell, maybe Tom Thibodeau. What if you gave Tibbs a great offensive coordinator, but then took that away, and now you just have kind of the raw thing? Does that wear off after a while? NFL, might he be Ron Rivera? Remember Riverboat Ron, all the aggression on 4th down? It sounded really great, and it was a lot of the fire-up stuff, and he won Coach of the Year multiple times. Everyone loved him until it didn't work anymore because the rest of the stuff wasn't working on 4th down and late in games. So I just have some reservations with the Lions, and I may be wrong, and frankly, I've been a little low on the Lions staff much of this Dan Campbell era, so maybe he'll just keep proving me wrong.
Now, the Patriots, this was one that did surprise me, given the history we have with some of these guys on the coaching staff. Mike Vrabel, we saw him have success in Tennessee. Josh McDaniels, while not necessarily having head coach success, we've seen him have plenty of success as a coordinator under Bill Belichick. So I guess what I'm wondering is I would have figured this would have at least pushed them more closer to average. So what's really holding them back?
Yeah, I think they're just maybe a victim of just there are a lot of coaches and somebody has to go below average. Frankly, I know that's not a very satisfying answer, but there is a little bit with Mike Vrabel of, again, floor raising, but not necessarily ceiling there. I love Vrabel in games. A lot of good decisions, a lot of good aggression. They tend to win a lot of close games, but they also tend to be in a lot of close games, which is maybe not great for coaching. Again, similar to some of the other guys we talked about, very heavy run for Mike Vrabel. They give up a lot of pass volume on defense. That's been consistent over the years. And then it really impacts who does he hire as a coordinator. And I think that his coordinators over the years I've never been really happy with in Tennessee. And I wasn't too excited about Josh McDaniels either. McDaniels has now had 8 years without Tom Brady, really only 2 good ones. One with Castle, one with Mac Jones. But without Tom Brady boosting him up, it hasn't really gone that well, head coach or offensive coordinator for McDaniels. So I'm not super excited about him. I'm not even really sure that's a great floor raising thing. So I don't love the coordinators. The defensive coordinator, Terrell Williams, is unknown for the most part. We'll see what he does. Another old Titans guy. So Vrabel kind of sticking with what he knows and the Patriots sticking with what they know. I'm not positive that this just isn't like a veteran version of what they tried with Gerard Mayo last year.
I'm far from a Patriots fan. I think the only pushback I would say is you said 2 names of Matt Castle and Mac Jones. And when Josh McDaniels was the coordinator with them, they did end up winning at least 10 games. So I just wanted to bring that up just as a footnote. But we'll see what happens with Drake May and this team this year. But now let's move to tier 7. And you've called this change ain't always a bad thing. And at number 26, you have the New Orleans Saints. Number 27, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Number 28, Cincinnati Bengals. And number 29, the New York Jets. I think the Bucs and Bengals are the 2 that kind of surprised me here because they are favored to make the playoffs. I guess, can you just say how much you think their coaching staff is actually holding these teams back?
Honestly, I think that the Bengals coaching staff has held them back for years. And I sort of like the coordinators they've gotten now, Dan Pitcher offense, Al Golden defense. I like that they changed it up. Lou Anarumo, very highly regarded on defense, but just they needed a new voice in the room. So I think Al Golden maybe can be that voice. Dan Pitcher, I don't know how much he gets to do because Zach Taylor, I think, still does a lot of things his way. And his way has been let the talent win. And there's definitely not something they're doing offensively to elevate the talent. And I wonder if sometimes it's even sort of putting a cap on it. If you have Burrow and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, you should be consistently making the playoffs and having top offenses. And they're just not quite doing that. So I think, again, you don't get to take away Super Bowls. If you took away the Super Bowl berth appearance for them, I think Zach Taylor, I don't know you'd have a job anymore, except that, the Bengals are a little cheap as well. So I've never loved the staff. I never loved even Zach Taylor that season when they made it. I didn't really think that it was with him. Todd Bowles has just not been a great front-facing head coach, right? The in-game stuff has never gone well for him. Like, you hate to have a bet on Todd Bowles and it's suddenly like, we got a 4th down decision or we got some late game clock management. You know how that's going to go. So defensively, great. He's a great defensive coach. Love to see Todd Bowles get fired and then get hired by my favorite team to coach the defense. That sounds great to me. I think he's really good there. But this is now another year that they got to replace the offensive coordinator. Now he's done it, so maybe he keeps on doing it. It worked with Dave Canales. He's got a head coaching job. Worked with Liam Cohen. He's got a head coaching job. I kind of like Josh Grizzard. I feel like you're in pretty good shape there. He worked with Cohen. He had a lot of experience with Miami with Mike McDaniel. I could buy it, but it's got to be worse than last year. Liam Cohen was really good, so it's got to be a downgrade until proven otherwise. So I think Bowles' in-game is holding them back, and until we actually see it, the downgrade has to be assumed at offensive coordinator.
Speaking of worse than last year, though, Saints and Jets cleaned house, fired everybody. I mean, can it get worse? Like, I just, if you asked me which two coaching staffs, like the Saints would probably be one of them that I would think that would be at the bottom of your list, and it's pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, this is just kind of like somebody's got to be down here, and we got to see it proven from these guys. So it's interesting with the Saints. You bring in Kellen Moore now. You're familiar with Kellen Moore as a Cowboys fan. He's kind of bounced around in recent years. Not too far back, Kellen Moore was a hot name. Everyone wanted him to be their head coach. Yeah. And Brandon Staley, the defensive coordinator, same thing. He got the head coaching job. He was everyone's analytics darling for like half a season, and then it crashed and burned so hard. I could see a world where the Saints are like, you know what? We didn't really get our first, second, third choice, but these are pretty good names. Like 4 years ago, 3 years ago, if you hired Moore and Staley together, that'd be really exciting. Like those are pretty good names you'd want to invest in. The Saints suck, man. Like they're not going to be any good this year. Why not find out? Like why not see if Kellen Moore and Brandon Staley are your guys? Give them a couple of years. Maybe you actually got, you know, some real steals here in the coaching cycle. With the Jets, Aaron Glenn comes over from Detroit. I've never been a huge Aaron Glenn guy. Obviously, the defense kept getting better and better, and then obviously they fell apart huge with the injuries. I don't really know what to make of that. I do feel like the Jets are trying for a culture thing here. They bring in Steve Wilkes. I've never been a great Steve Wilkes fan. I feel like his floor, his ceiling is pretty limited. I do like Tanner Engstrad. I think that he has a pretty good floor as far as a run game, especially with this team, with their offensive line, with the running backs. And I can't tell you what tree he's from, but I said I wasn't going to say his name any more times on this podcast, and it rhymes with Schmen Schmonson. But I like Tanner Engstrand for that reason. So somebody's got to be at the bottom. These names just haven't done it yet, but I think there's some potential. We got to see them do it.
Well, here are the teams at the bottom, because now we are moving to our final tier, and you've called this Dead Man Walking. And at number 30, you have the Tennessee Titans, and at 31, you have the New York Giants. Now, brace for it. The last team, you may not have heard them mentioned yet, the Dallas Cowboys you have as the last ranked coaching staff in the NFL. So I really just have two questions for you. First off, how dare you? Secondly, is there any optimism at all, though, for the fact that, you know, we brought in new offensive coordinator in Clayton Adams, you know, Matt Eberflus, not a front-facing coach now, moved back to defensive coordinator. Just talk to me a little bit about how you got to having the Cowboys as last.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to start with Brian Schottenheimer, and I don't know why the Cowboys are starting with Brian Schottenheimer. It's just a very weird, flawed hiring process. I don't understand how they got there other than just the guy who was already in-house. So I didn't love that to start out, and just looking back, there's just not a lot that you like about when he's been the play caller, which he is in this offense. Here's the silver lining that you're looking for. Somehow Brian Schottenheimer forgets on game day that he's the guy calling plays and Clayton Adams gets to be in charge, the offensive coordinator. He's not calling plays, but somehow that happens. Now I can get optimistic. I like Clayton Adams. We talked about him on the offensive lines. He had some really diverse, really interesting run games in Arizona. So I like what he brings to the team, but I don't love how it fits with Schottenheimer. It's pretty different than what he normally does offensively. He likes the run heavy, but it's different sort of concepts. In Dallas, has actually been pretty pass heavy under McCarthy. I didn't love McCarthy, the head coach, but I thought it sort of fit what this roster has. I don't see a fit with no running backs on the roster for this run heavy, old school Schottenheimer sort of thing. Matt Eberflus, I think it's fine. Like I can't get too excited. I can't get too angry about it, but I don't think there's a lot of ceiling to it. Nick Sorensen, they brought back to run special teams. Nick Sorensen was the defensive coordinator last year. Like we're crossing units now to fill spots on the roster. And so I don't really understand what the Cowboys are doing. If you could somehow erase the shoddy of it all, I like Clayton Adams, and they got Ken Dorsey in as kind of a pass specialist. I like the names that are here. If you told me Schottenheimer is just going to coach and let the guys on the coaching staff run the offense, I think I could talk myself into it. Maybe we get there in season, but until we do, it's just too much Brian Schottenheimer for me.
All right, I don't want to hear any more about it. I'll concede. You can have the Cowboys at last, and we'll hopefully win 9 or 10 games, and maybe they move up in the rankings as a result. But there is more to see. But the one thing I will just say is I don't really think there's much to say about the Giants. I think Brian Daboll should be favored to be first coach fired if anybody's looking for those kind of betting markets. But the Tennessee Titans, I think, is a little bit more interesting because Will Levis last year, pretty trashy offensive line. That was revamped. Now Cam Ward coming in. I guess I don't want to go ahead and say, like, do you think this staff is like cooked? But like, do you think that there's room for improvement on this Tennessee Titans coaching staff? Because I think they could move up if we see them emerge, in the season.
I mean, there's room for improvement because they've been terrible. So then anything they do is improvement. That's not totally fair. I quite liked Denard Wilson, actually, the defensive coordinator. I thought he did a great job with the team, got them to around league average on DVOA. I think he's pretty good. So I've got my eye on him. Love Bill Callahan, the offensive line coach. We talked a lot about him. That's the number one offensive line coach. So that's what you like about the team. I've just never been a Brian Callahan guy. So he's the head coach. He came over from years of being offensive coordinator with the Bengals. We talked about it with the Bengals. Like, he never did anything there to really elevate the team. I don't know how much he got to do, but I haven't seen anything here either. And now last year, I don't remember the record, but the Titans set the record for worst ATS record in an entire season.
It was brutal.
That's meaningful. If even we know you're bad and you still keep underperforming game after game, that tells me you keep missing expectations even as we lower the bar and you still can't hit them. So I don't know, man. I don't think that it's over for this staff, but if I were the Titans fan and I've got a pretty good line starting to come together and I've got my brand new rookie coach, I'm not positive this is the staff I wanted to kind of steer the ship going forward. But last year, maybe we just didn't learn that much. Maybe they need a fresh start. I don't know. Somebody's got to be at the bottom. And I think joining your Cowboys and Giants, I think it's fair to put the Titans down in the mix there.
Right. Okay. Well, let's just talk about the top 10 then. We're done talking about the bottom of the NFL. Let's go back to the top 10. Let's review this. So again, you have the Niners at number 1, Ravens and Chiefs second and third. They're in their own tier. In tier 2, at number 4, you have the Rams. Number 5, the Bills. Number 6, the Vikings. Number 7, the Green Bay Packers. And rounding out the top 10, you have the Los Angeles Chargers, Seattle Seahawks, and Houston Texans. What would you say is probably the biggest betting takeaway that you could take away from these rankings when you did this?
I mean, number 11, you didn't quite get to, but the Chicago Bears, the team that we know by now I must be in on. So all in on the Bears, taking a big step forward. If I'm going to say offensive line and coaching are the two big edges that I have on the market, then a team that makes a huge leap in both of those areas, the Bears, I have to be in on that team for the season. Tough schedule. I know it's got a big hill to climb, but in on the Bears. I think conversely, big warning flag for Detroit. Bears fringe top 10, if I'm right. Packers, Vikings top 7. The Lions drop all the way down to 24th. So the Lions suddenly might be, by margin, the worst coaching staff in their own division. That's a pretty big swing. And again, listen to the offensive line rankings. Not quite the same fall, but a pretty big drop there as well. I have to be in on Chicago. I have to be at least tepid with Detroit. And one other team, Super Bowl contender, to kind of be concerned about at least, Chiefs better not be too comfortable. The Chiefs dropped from 1 down to 3, but look at how the divisions come in around them. Jim Harbaugh comes in, Sean Payton comes in, Pete Carroll comes in. This is like the coaches from the last 2 decades of our lives. And Andy Reid, Andy's doing great, but if they're slipping back a little bit, and now suddenly the whole division is in my top 14, that's 4 of the top 7 AFC teams. For a long time, the Chiefs just steamrolled right through the division. That was part of the easy path to why they were so good. I don't know if there are so many easy games now for the Chiefs anymore. So it's not a red flag yet. I'm not even sure it's orange with the Chiefs, but maybe a bit of a yellow flag on Kansas City. So those are a few takeaways. Thoughts on Bears, Chiefs, or Lions?
I think I'm surprised on the inverse. I would have thought you'd probably be like, yes, we like the Bears, but let's, temper expectations. And then the Chiefs, considering we look at some of the rankings that we've done either for quarterback or skill position, it's like, oh, this is still the cream of the crop. I think I'm a little surprised that you think the Chiefs are going to downgrade, because I don't think Spagnuolo or Nagy, I don't think any of those guys are leaving for head coaching. So I think just the continuity will still be there. But I think the Chicago Bears, they're a very popular pick to move up, especially in the NFC that we talked about, where there's a little bit more opportunity in the NFC given the quarterback disparity that we've seen. But I'm more interested now in some of these turnaround potential teams that you have, because you had 5 teams that are kind of in the turnaround potential, like the Colts, Cards, Jags, Panthers, Falcons. And you've got 2 teams in the NFC South in a division where a lot of people are just presuming the Bucs are going to win it.
Yeah, I mean, Bucs and Saints were down near like bottom 5 of coaching. So Panthers or Falcons, if one of those staffs can take a step forward, we talked about Zach Robinson. Could he be the hot name? Could Dave Canales and Bryce Young together, could they be the name? I didn't mention Ejiro Evero, their defensive coordinator. He's been a hot name for defense for a while. If one of those staffs takes a step forward, that could be, a nice division ticket for you. The Jaguars I've talked about a few different times as a possible AFC South division ticket. Houston's pretty far up in the rankings, but if you like Liam Cohen, if you like where they're going, these teams are the sort of potential tier. Not only are they like decent, they're in the like 18 to 22 range, right? But also, I'm not all in on these guys yet. So if something goes well for Liam Cohen or Zach Robinson, some of these names, those teams can start to move up the rankings pretty quickly that way. So that I want to go a little further down the list too, because I think to me, one of the easiest ways you can surprise as far as like an NFL futures ticket that you can rise up the rankings is get that hot new offensive coordinator that blows up. And suddenly it's like, man, where did this offense come from? So here's a few more teams down the list. The Raiders, Chip Kelly, we'll see what he can do. Chip Kelly has been an exciting name for a while. It's new to the NFL, but we're seeing some of the stuff Chip's done be what other guys have done to raise floors around the league. So they're around middle of the pack. I have him 18th among offensive coordinator. If he gets up into the top 10, maybe the Raiders coaching staff gets to the top 10 as well. Maybe they're sort of a playoff team then. A little further down the list, guys we don't know much about. Tanner Engstrand with the Jets. We talked about him. Nick Caley with the Texans. The Texans are a team that if Nick Caley is good, that's suddenly right in the Super Bowl, circle of teams. We had a great defense. Man, we figured out the offense. This is great. The Buccaneers, if Grizzard is good, could they be also maybe a surprise NFC Super Bowl team where, okay, this actually isn't holding us back. This is a strength. And from a bad to a strength, if that's brand new, that can really swing your season in a hurry. So I think those names are names to keep an eye out on. And just a couple other names to be cautious of, names we've said a lot about, the Bucs and the Bengals. If they're in the bottom 5 coaching, we talked about the Bucs, they go either way with how Grizzard is, but I've never been a huge Todd Bowles guy, and I just have to be skeptical on the Bengals. And by the way, second straight day, the Bengals are in our bottom 5. Offensive lines and coaching, you're never going to hear me buying a Bengals Super Bowl ticket if that's the case, because that's the things I'm putting the most stock in, and that's just not a place that stock has been safe with Cincinnati.
Okay, well, that'll do it for today's episode of the Action Network podcast. I want to thank you for tuning in. Keep your eyes open for more NFL rankings from Brandon in the coming weeks. We're going to have still offenses and defenses, and we're going to rank all 32 teams 1 through 32. And don't forget to leave us that 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to the podcast. Download the free award-winning Action Network app, and you could save $20 on an annual pro account by using code POD20 at actionnetwork.com/pro. And also check out the Action Network Discord. There's a link in the episode description of this podcast. So for Brandon Anderson, I'm Gilles Gallant. Thank you for listening to the Action Network podcast, and bon chance.